The silence inside the penthouse was not a peaceful one. It was the kind of heavy, empty silence that settles in a place that is too big for the people living in it. Everywhere you looked, there were expensive things. Glass tables sat perfectly aligned on the marble floor. Huge paintings hung on the walls, looking cold and untouchable. The furniture looked like it had never been sat on, and for the most part, it hadn't. It was a house that looked like a magazine, but it didn't feel like a home. Sam moved through the long hallway quietly. She wore her uniform, a simple dark dress with white shoes that made no sound on the hard floor. She wasn't just a maid here, she was the one who tried to keep the life in a house that was slowly forgetting what life was supposed to look like. In her hands, she carried a basket of fresh laundry. It was warm and smelled of lavender, a small comfort in a place that smelled mostly of lemon cleaner and cold air. She stopped outside the playroom. Usually, this was a place of noise. 2 6-year-old boys usually filled this space with shouting, laughing, and the sound of toys crashing into the walls. But today, there was nothing. Sam put her ear to the door for a second. She frowned. It wasn't just quiet, it was sad. She pushed the door open gently. Inside, the room was messy, but in a still sort of way. The twins, Toby and Lucas, were sitting on the floor. They weren't playing with the mountain of Lego blocks or the expensive race cars their father had bought them last week. They were just sitting. Their backs were against the wall, their knees pulled up to their chests. They were wearing tiny t-shirts made of soft cotton and dark pants that probably cost more than Sam's entire monthly rent. But right now, they just looked small and lonely. Sam set the laundry basket down in the hallway and stepped into the room. She walked over the thick rug and crouched down in front of them. She didn't ask them why they were quiet. She knew why. It was a hard day. The calendar on the kitchen wall had a red circle around today's date. It was their mother's birthday. She had been gone for a year now, and the house still felt the hole she had left behind. The father, Mr. King, was a man who owned buildings and companies and skyscrapers. He was very good at making money, but he didn't know how to handle grief. He didn't know how to handle the silence. So, he hid in his office. He left early in the morning and came home late, burying himself in work because work didn't ask him about his feelings. "Hey, you two," Sam said softly. She reached out and tucked a piece of hair behind Toby's ear. Toby looked up at her. His eyes were red, like he had been crying but didn't want anyone to see. "Hi, Sam," he whispered. Lucas just looked at his hands, picking at a loose thread on his pants. "You been in here a long time," Sam said, keeping her voice light. "It's too nice outside to be in the dark." Lucas shook his head. "Dad said we have to stay inside. He said the nannies are coming at 4. Sam checked her watch. It was barely noon. She felt a sharp pinch of annoyance in her chest. Mr. King meant well, she told herself. He thought that structure and rules and schedules would keep the boys safe. He thought that hiring the best staff would fix the sadness. But Sam knew that you couldn't hire someone to hug a child. You couldn't schedule a time to miss your mom. "The nannies aren't here yet," Sam said. She stood up and brushed off her knees. "And I'm the one in charge right now. And I think we need some air." Toby looked at her, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Can we go to the park?" Sam looked toward the window. The park across the street was gated and manicured. It was empty, just like this house. She shook her head slowly. "No. Not today. Today we need to go where there are people. We need to see that the world is still turning, even if we feel like stopping. She held out her hands. Come on. Get your shoes on. The boys didn't move. They were used to rules. They were used to asking permission for everything, even for a glass of water. Is Dad going to be mad? Lucas asked quietly. That was the question that always hung in the air. The fear of making their father angry, or worse, disappointing him. Sam leaned down and looked them both in the eye. Your father is very busy. He is working hard. But he wouldn't want you to be sad in a dark room. Trust me. Just for a little while. We'll go on a secret mission. The word mission did it. Toby's shoulders dropped an inch. He wasn't sad anymore, he was curious. What kind of mission? A mission to find the best noise in the city, Sam said with a smile she didn't totally feel but wanted them to see. It didn't take them long to get ready. They were good boys, polite and well-behaved, almost to a fault. They put on their sneakers and lined up by the door. Sam felt like she was leading two little soldiers instead of two energetic first graders. They walked through the long hallway toward the elevator. The floors were so shiny that Sam could see their reflections in them. They passed the heavy doors of the home gym. They passed the guest bathroom that was bigger than Sam's entire apartment. They passed the kitchen, where a chef was chopping vegetables with a rhythmic, sharp sound. The chef looked up, surprised to see the boys out of their room, but Sam just put a finger to her lips and winked. He smiled and went back to work. They reached the main entrance. There was no wooden door to struggle with here. Instead, a sleek sheet of clear glass slid open automatically as they approached. It was silent and smooth, welcoming them into the elevator. The elevator ride was fast. The numbers ticked by on the digital screen. 40, 30, 20, 10. Sam watched the boys. They were holding hands. They were nervous. Leaving the penthouse felt like leaving a fortress, but Sam knew that sometimes, fortresses can become prisons if you stay inside them too long. She just wanted them to remember what the sun felt like on their faces. When the door slid open at the ground floor, the atmosphere changed immediately. The lobby of the building was grand, with high ceilings and flowers that were replaced every 3 days to ensure they were perfect. A security guard sat at a desk near the front. He was an older man, usually half asleep in his chair. Today, he was reading a newspaper. Sam walked up to the desk with the boys on either side of her. She felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. Technically, she wasn't supposed to take them out without a formal authorization form signed by Mr. King or the head of the household staff. Technically, this was against the rules. Good afternoon, Arthur, Sam said. Her voice was steady. Arthur lowered his newspaper. He looked over the rim of his glasses. He saw the maid, and then he saw the two boys. He frowned slightly, looking at his watch. Taking them out, Sam, it's a bit early, isn't it? Yes, Sam said. She didn't make excuses. She didn't lie. Mr. King is very busy in his meetings. The boys have finished their lessons. I'm taking them for a treat. A little educational trip. Arthur looked at the boys. They were looking up at him with wide, serious eyes. They looked so clean and proper. Arthur sighed. He knew Mr. King wasn't in the building. He knew the boys probably hadn't left the apartment in days. He was a father, too, once. Just keep them close, Arthur muttered. He reached for his clipboard. Sign them out here. And be back before the evening rush. Sam let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She scribbled her name on the paper. "Thank you, Arthur. We will." She took the boy's hands again. Her hand was rough and calloused from years of cleaning, but their hands were soft and warm. She squeezed them tight. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready," Toby said. They walked toward the front of the lobby. The exterior wall of the building was entirely made of glass. As they got closer, the sensors picked up their movement. The huge glass panels began to slide apart. The air from outside rushed in to meet them. It wasn't filtered or air-conditioned. It smelled like car exhaust and hot pavement and food from the street vendors. To Sam, it smelled like freedom. They stepped out of the cool, shadowed lobby and onto the busy sidewalk. The city noise hit them all at once: honking horns, sirens, the chatter of pedestrians, the hum of engines. It was chaotic and loud and messy. Lucas flinched slightly, covering his ears for a second. It was a lot for a boy who lived in a soundproof box. But then, he looked up. He saw the sky stretching out above the tall buildings, blue and endless. He saw a flock of birds diving between the skyscrapers. He lowered his hands. Sam looked down at them. They looked tiny against the backdrop of the massive city, but for the first time in a long time, they looked like they were actually part of the world. "Where are we going?" Lucas asked, looking up at Sam with trust in his eyes. Sam pointed down the street toward the giant complex of shops and lights a few blocks away. "We are going to the mall," Sam said. "And I have a feeling today is going to be a day you remember for a long time." They started walking. The glass doors of the building slid shut behind them, sealing the silent, empty penthouse away. Ahead of them, the city waited. The moment they stepped onto the busy sidewalk, the world seemed to wake up around them. For the twins, Toby and Lucas, it was almost like landing on a different planet. Inside their father's building, the air was always cool and smelled like expensive flowers and cleaning products. Out here, the air was warm and thick. It smelled like hot dogs cooking on a metal cart, exhaust from the buses, and the sweet, dusty scent of the city pavement. Sam held their hands tightly. She knew that for two boys who lived in a glass tower high above the streets, the ground level could feel scary and chaotic. Cars zoomed by with a roar, sending ripples of air against their legs. People marched past them with their heads down, talking on phones or rushing to meetings, not even noticing the two small boys in their perfect little outfits. Sam squeezed their hands. "Just stick with me," she said cheerfully. "We are going to cross here." They waited for the light to change. A crowd of people gathered around them. A woman with a stroller bumped into Sam's arm but didn't even say sorry. A man in a business suit shouted into a headset phone. Lucas flinched and pressed his leg against Sam's. She rubbed his back with her free hand. It was a lot of noise, a lot of rushing. But Sam knew that sometimes, you have to be in the mess to feel alive. When the walking signal lit up, they moved. Sam walked fast, leading them like ducklings across the wide avenue. They reached the other side and turned the corner. Suddenly, the mall came into view. It was a massive structure, not just one building but a series of connected glass and steel arches. It sparkled in the afternoon sun. "Wow," Toby whispered. He let go of Sam's hand just for a second to point up at the highest roof. "It looks like a spaceship." "It does," Sam agreed. "But don't worry, there are no aliens inside. Just regular people doing their shopping." They walked toward the main sliding glass doors. As they approached, the sensors saw them coming, and the doors slid open with a soft whoosh. The change in temperature was instant. The heat of the street vanished, replaced by the cool, conditioned air of the mall. But it wasn't the temperature that made the boys stop in their tracks. It was the sound. The mall was loud, but it was a different kind of loud than the street. It was a happy noise. Music was playing from hidden speakers, pop songs with a heavy beat, and the sound of hundreds of voices echoed off the high ceilings and shiny floors. Lucas looked up at Sam, his eyes wide. "It's so big," he said. Sam smiled down at him. "That's the point. Now, we aren't here to buy anything fancy today. We are here to look and to listen. I want you to tell me what you see." They started walking. The floor beneath their feet was smooth white tile, polished so well that you could see the reflection of the lights above. They passed the first set of stores. These were the high-end luxury shops, the kind where the security guards stand at the door wearing suits and earpieces. Sam didn't even slow down. She knew Mr. King would take them there if he wanted to buy them shoes that cost $1,000, but that wasn't what the boys needed today. They walked past a store that sold nothing but crystal figurines. The things inside sparkled, but they looked fragile. They passed a gadget store where televisions the size of garage doors were playing action movies. A few teenagers were standing there watching, eating popcorn. "Do you want to go in?" Sam asked, nodding at the TV store. Toby shook his head. "We have a TV," he said. "It's huge. But it's never on." Sam felt a little pang in her chest. That was true. The TV in the playroom was the size of a movie screen, but without their mother to watch cartoons with them, it just sat there like a black mirror. "Come on then," Sam said. "Let us find the real action." They moved deeper into the mall. The crowds got thicker here. This was the part where the regular families went. Sam steered them toward the large atrium in the center of the building. The ceiling here was made of glass panels, letting natural sunlight pour down onto the lower level. Before they even reached the center, the boys smelled it. It was a smell that can make anyone smile, no matter how old they are. It was the smell of sugar, yeast, and butter. "Pretzels," Lucas said, sniffing the air. He hadn't realized how hungry he was. Lunch at the penthouse was usually a perfectly measured meal of grilled chicken and steamed vegetables, eaten at a long table where no one spoke. It was fuel, not fun. Sam laughed. "You have a good nose, Lucas. Come on." She led them to a small stand that was painted in bright colors. A man with a hairnet and a big apron was pulling trays of hot, twisted dough out of the oven. The smell was overwhelming in the best way possible. "3 pretzels, please," Sam told the man. "And 3 lemonades." The man nodded and grabbed the warm bread with a piece of wax paper. He handed them over. Sam paid with her own money, crumpled bills from her purse, not the shiny black card their father used. She handed a soft, warm pretzel to each boy. They were hot to the touch. Toby bit into his, and a little bit of salt stuck to his lip. His eyes closed for a second. "This is so good," he mumbled with his mouth full. "Watch the mess," Sam said gently, handing him a napkin. But she didn't scold him. In fact, she took a big bite of her own and enjoyed the way the soft bread tasted. They found a small table near a railing that looked down into the lower level. They sat there, swinging their legs, chewing on their pretzels, and watching the people go by. For 10 minutes, nobody said anything. They just ate. But the tension that was in their shoulders when they left the apartment was starting to melt away. Lucas got mustard on his chin, and Sam wiped it off without making a big deal. Toby laughed when he spilled a few drops of lemonade, and instead of worrying about the stain on his expensive pants, Sam just wiped it up with a napkin. It was a small moment, just a snack at a mall, but it felt like a rebellion against the strict, clean, quiet life they usually lived. They were making a mess. They were making noise. "Look at that," Toby said suddenly, pointing down to the lower level. Sam looked. Down in the center of the mall, there was a large open space. Usually, it was used for pop-up shops or holiday displays. But today, it was mostly empty, except for one thing sitting right in the middle of the polished floor. It was a grand piano. It wasn't behind a rope. It didn't have a "Do Not Touch" sign on it. It was just sitting there, the lid open, waiting. It was a shiny, black instrument that looked completely out of place next to the escalators and the cookie stand. "I see it," Sam said. "Can we go closer?" Lucas asked. He had finished his pretzel and was licking the salt off his fingers. He looked at the piano with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Of course," Sam said. She gathered up their trash and threw it away. "We have plenty of time. Mr. King won't be home for hours." They stood up and walked toward the escalator. As they rode down the moving stairs, the boys gripped the rubber handrail. They were getting higher and higher, or rather, lower and lower into the busy part of the mall. When they stepped off at the bottom, the piano was right there. It was even more impressive up close. It was a beautiful instrument, the black surface reflecting the lights from above. The keys looked white and inviting. There was a small bench sitting in front of it. Sam stopped a few feet away. She watched the boys. They didn't run to it. They didn't bang on the keys like some kids might have. They walked up to it slowly, almost reverently. They stood in front of the piano, looking at it like it was a sleeping animal. The mall noise swirled around them, shoppers walking by with bags, babies crying, music from the clothing stores, but the space around the piano seemed quiet. Toby reached out a small hand. He hovered it over the keys, hesitating. He looked back at Sam. "It's okay," she said softly. "Go ahead." He shook his head. "I can't," he whispered. "Dad says we aren't good at it. He says it's a waste of time." Sam felt a flash of anger at their father, but she pushed it down. Mr. King didn't understand music. He understood spreadsheets. He didn't know that music wasn't about being perfect, it was about letting things out. "Music isn't about being perfect, Toby," Sam said, stepping up behind them. "It's about how you feel. And today, you have a lot of feelings, don't you?" Lucas nodded. He looked at the piano keys. "Mom played," he said so quietly Sam almost didn't hear him over the mall noise. "She played for us before she got sick. She used to let us sit on her lap while she played." Sam's heart hurt a little. She remembered the mother. She was a woman who laughed often and sang in the kitchen, a woman who brought warmth to the cold penthouse. Since she was gone, the piano in the house had been closed up and covered in a sheet, like it was too painful to look at. "I remember," Sam said. She put a hand on each boy's shoulder. "You know, she wouldn't want you to be scared of the piano. She would want you to make noise." Toby looked at the keys. He pressed one single note. A clear, high C rang out. It wasn't a sad sound. It was pure and bright. A few people walking by slowed down to look at the two well-dressed boys standing by the big piano. "Is that it?" Toby asked, looking disappointed. "Just one note." Sam smiled. "Music is just a bunch of notes put together," she said. "But sometimes, You need help starting. Come here. She walked around the bench and sat down. She patted the empty space on either side of her. Sit. The boys climbed up. The bench was wide enough for the three of them. Toby was on her left, Lucas on her right. Their feet dangled above the floor, not yet long enough to reach the pedals. Sam wasn't a concert pianist. She wasn't a genius. But she knew how to play a few things. She had learned on an old, out-of-tune piano at her church when she was a little girl. She placed her fingers on the keys. She didn't play a complicated classical song. She played something simple. A melody that everyone knows. A lullaby. The sound filled the little corner of the mall. It was a soft, gentle tune that cut through the noise of the shoppers. As she played, she felt the boys relax beside her. They stopped looking around nervously. They started to listen. Try hitting this one, Sam said to Lucas, nodding to a white key. Lucas pressed it. It fit the song perfectly. He smiled, a genuine, bright smile that showed his missing front tooth. Good job, Sam said. Now you, Toby. She guided them, note by note. It wasn't a performance. It was a discovery. They were exploring the sounds, finding out that pressing a key made a noise, and that noise could be happy or sad. They were sitting on a bench in the middle of a crowded mall, eating pretzels and playing music with their maid. And for the first time in a year, the heavy silence that followed them everywhere was finally breaking. The black and white keys sat waiting in front of them, gleaming under the bright mall lights. Sam sat in the middle, her posture relaxed, while the boys perched on either side of her. They were small against the massive curve of the instrument, their sneakers swinging in the air, unable to reach the gold pedals on the floor. Sam's fingers were not the long, slender fingers of a concert pianist. They were short, a bit stubby, and rough from years of scrubbing floors and washing dishes. But they were gentle. She didn't press down hard. She tapped the keys softly, letting the sound ring out clearly. She played a simple tune. It wasn't fast or complicated. It was just a melody that went up and down, like a bird flying in the wind. The boys watched her hands closely. They were used to seeing people type on computers or tap on screens, but this was different. This made a sound that came from inside the big piece of furniture, a sound that vibrated in the wooden bench they were sitting on. See, Sam said, leaning over to Lucas. It's not magic. It's just pressing a key. Lucas looked at his own hand. He stretched out his index finger. He looked at Sam, asking for permission with his eyes. She nodded. He poked a key. A low, deep note sounded. It wasn't the same note Sam was playing. It didn't really fit the song. But when the sound came out, Lucas jumped a little, then giggled. It was a sound Sam hadn't heard from him in a long time. It wasn't a polite giggle. It was a real, belly-deep laugh. Try another one, Sam encouraged him. This time, Lucas hit two keys at once. A clunky chord rang out. It wasn't pretty. It sounded a bit like a mistake. But before he could pull his hand back, thinking he did something wrong, Sam smiled and hit two keys on her side that matched his. Suddenly, the mistake became part of the music. Toby watched this exchange. He was the older brother, usually the one who worried about rules and doing things right. He saw Lucas making noise and getting praised for it. He saw that the piano hadn't bitten them. He saw that his father wasn't there to tell them to stop. Toby lifted his hands. He placed them on the keys carefully, his fingers hovering for a second like he was afraid they would burn. Then, he pressed down. He played a cluster of high notes. It sounded like tiny bells ringing in the distance. Sam stopped her playing for a moment to let his sound fade away. "That was beautiful, Toby," she said. "High and light, just like a bird." "Can we do it together?" Toby asked. He looked down at the keys. "Mom used to play songs." "I don't know any songs." "You don't need to know a song that someone else wrote," Sam said softly. She shifted on the bench so she could see both of them. "We can make our own song. That's the best kind. Whatever you feel in your heart, you play with your fingers." She put her left hand on the low keys and her right hand on the high keys. "Follow me," she said. She started a rhythm. It was simple. Thump thump, thump thump. A heartbeat sound. Toby joined in. He started hitting the high notes in a pattern that matched her rhythm. Ding 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 ding. Lucas, not wanting to be left out, started hitting the middle notes. He didn't have a rhythm yet, he was just exploring the sound. But as they kept going, something amazing happened. The noise began to organize itself. The deep beat from Sam, the sparkly notes from Toby, and the chaotic energy from Lucas started to weave together. They weren't playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star anymore. They weren't playing anything you would hear on the radio. They were playing the sound of their day. They were playing the sound of leaving the dark apartment. They were playing the taste of the pretzels. They were playing the relief of being out of the house and the sadness of missing their mother, all at the same time. The music grew louder. They were hitting the keys harder now, lost in the moment. Sam had to slide over on the bench to make room for their elbows, which were flying back and forth. The boys were leaning forward, their faces flushed with effort and excitement. People walking by in the mall started to notice. At first, it was just a glance. People heard the piano and assumed it was a recording, or maybe a professional musician practicing for a show. But when they looked, they saw a maid in her uniform and two little boys. A woman pushing a shopping cart stopped. She had been looking at her phone, but she lowered it to watch them. A man carrying a briefcase slowed his walk. He stood near a pillar, listening. A group of teenagers, who had been laughing loudly near the fountain, went quiet. They weren't stopping because the music was perfect. It wasn't. It had wrong notes. It had missed beats. The tempo sped up and slowed down unpredictably. But it was real. There was an honesty to the sound that you don't hear very often. It was raw. Usually, when people play music in public, they are showing off. They want you to see how good they are. But Sam, Toby, and Lucas weren't showing off. They were sharing something. The mall was full of fake things, fake lights, fake plants, plastic displays. But the emotions coming out of that piano were 100% real. A security guard walked by on his patrol. He looked ready to move them along, thinking they were causing trouble. But when he got close enough to see their faces, he stopped. He saw the tears mixed with the smiles on the boys' faces. He saw the way Sam was looking at them, not like employees, but like they were her own children. The guard took his hands off his belt and stood still, watching. They played for several minutes. It felt like a long time, but it also felt like a second. The song didn't have a clear ending. It just sort of slowed down. Toby's hands got tired, so he played softer notes. Lucas ran out of breath, so he stopped hitting the keys with force. Sam's rhythm slowed down until it was just a gentle tap, tap, tap. Finally, Sam took her hands off the keys and placed them in her lap. The boys followed her lead. The last note hung in the air for a second, vibrating through the metal strings and the wood, before fading away into silence. The mall didn't stay silent for long. The sound of the escalators and the stores rushed back in. But for a few seconds, nobody moved. Then, a single person started clapping. It was an older man sitting on a bench nearby, holding a shopping bag. He clapped slowly, with respect. Then the woman with the phone joined in. Then the teenagers. Then the security guard. The applause wasn't polite golf clapping. It was genuine. It was the sound of people recognizing something special. Strangers were smiling at each other. A few people had watery eyes. Toby and Lucas looked around, shocked. They saw the crowd. They saw the people smiling and clapping for them. Their faces turned bright red. Lucas ducked his head behind Sam's arm, shy now that the music was over. But he was peeking out, grinning. Toby sat up straighter. He looked proud. He had done something. He had made all these people stop and listen. Sam looked at the crowd and gave a small, humble nod. She didn't stand up to take a bow. She just wrapped an arm around each boy, hugging them against her sides. "See," she whispered into Toby's ear. "You are a musician." "We just made noise," Toby whispered back, but he was smiling so big it looked like his face might hurt. "That's what music is," Sam said. "It's just noise that comes from the heart." She looked past the crowd, hoping to catch the eye of someone who could take a picture, maybe to show their father later. But as she looked past the front row of onlookers, her smile froze. Standing near the back of the crowd, almost hidden by a large potted plant, was a man. He wasn't holding a shopping bag. He was holding a briefcase. His suit was gray and expensive, perfectly tailored to his tall frame. His hair was cut short and neat. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not in a noisy mall. It was Mr. King. He must have come home early and found them gone. Or maybe he had tracked the phone she carried. He was standing perfectly still, his briefcase hanging forgotten at his side. His face, usually so hard and unreadable, looked pale. He was staring at the piano, not at the crowd. Sam felt a sudden spike of fear. Had they crossed a line? Would he be angry that they were making a scene? Would he fire her for taking them out without permission? She braced herself for him to step forward and scold them, to tell them they were being ridiculous and that it was time to go back to the quiet, perfect apartment. But he didn't move. He just stood there, watching his sons, his eyes locked on them as if he was seeing them for the very first time. The clapping of the crowd was starting to die down, but in that moment, the silence between the father and the piano was the loudest thing in the room. The applause started to fade away, drifting off like the last notes of the song they had just played. The people in the mall began to move again, slowly returning to their shopping and their busy lives. But the atmosphere in the little circle around the piano had changed. It felt heavier now, but not in a bad way. It felt important. Toby and Lucas were still sitting on the bench, looking at their hands. They seemed surprised by what they had just done, as if their fingers had a mind of their own. Their chests were rising and falling a little faster than usual. They looked alive. The sadness that had been hanging off them like a wet coat all morning was gone, replaced by a bright pink flush on their cheeks. Sam squeezed their shoulders. She wanted to tell them how proud she was, but the words felt stuck in her throat. She looked up again to the spot where she had seen him. He was still there. Mr. King hadn't moved an inch. He was standing near a large fake plant, looking completely out of place in his dark, sharp suit. Everyone else in the mall was wearing jeans or t-shirts, carrying colorful bags. He looked like a statue made of marble that someone had accidentally left in the middle of a playground. His briefcase was heavy in his hand, but his grip looked loose, like he had forgotten he was holding it. Sam's heart began to beat faster. She stood up slowly from the piano bench, smoothing down her uniform dress. She felt the need to stand between the man and the boys, a protective instinct kicking in. She didn't think he would hurt them, but she knew his temper. She knew he didn't like surprises, and this was a big one. The boys noticed the change in her posture. Lucas looked up, following her eyes. When he saw his father standing there, his smile vanished instantly. He shrank back against the piano, his small hands gripping the edge of the bench until his knuckles turned white. Toby stopped swinging his legs. He looked down at the keys, terrified that he had done something wrong. The crowd, sensing a shift in mood, thinned out quickly. Strangers are good at sensing when a family moment is turning private, or perhaps when trouble is brewing. The security guard glanced over, looking a bit concerned, but stayed near his post. Mr. King took a step forward. Then another. The sound of his leather shoes on the hard tile was sharp and distinct. Clack. Clack. It cut through the ambient noise of the mall. He walked right past the people who were still lingering, not looking at them. His eyes were fixed on the piano, and on his children. When he reached the edge of the cleared area, he stopped. He was only a few feet away now. Sam straightened her back, ready to apologize, ready to explain that they just needed some air, ready to beg him not to be angry. But Mr. King didn't look at Sam. He didn't look angry. In fact, his face, usually so tight and controlled, looked completely blank. It was the look of a man who has seen a ghost, or perhaps a miracle. "Toby," he said. His voice was deep and rough. It wasn't a shout, but it carried authority. Toby flinched. "I'm sorry, Dad," he blurted out quickly, his voice trembling. "Sam brought us here. We didn't mean to make a mess. I know I'm not supposed to play. I know we aren't good at it." The words rushed out of him in a jumble, fueled by the fear that he had ruined the perfect image his father expected. He expected to be told to stand up, to stop embarrassing himself, and to go home immediately. He waited for the lecture about time management and focus. But Mr. King didn't lecture. He let his briefcase fall to the floor with a heavy thud. It was such an uncharacteristic thing for him to do, dropping $1,000 leather case on the dirty mall floor, that Lucas actually looked up, his fear overridden by confusion. Mr. King took another step. He walked around the side of the piano until he was standing right in front of his sons. He was a tall man, looming over them, blocking out the light from the ceiling. He looked down at the keys, then at their hands. "You played," Mr. King said. It was a statement, not a question. We just hit the keys," Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible. "Sam helped us." "I heard," Mr. King said. He looked up then, past the boys, and his eyes met Sam's. For a second, Sam thought she saw anger. But it wasn't anger. It was a look of profound sadness mixed with something else. "Gratitude, relief. "Thank you, Sam," he said quietly. It wasn't the cold command she was used to. It was a genuine thank you. "You're welcome, sir," she answered softly, stepping back to give him space. Mr. King looked back at the boys. He knelt down on one knee. This was the most shocking thing of all. The man who ran a giant company, who shook hands with powerful people and never had time for breakfast, was kneeling on a dirty mall floor so he could look his sons in the eye. He was now at their level. He reached out a hand. Toby flinched again, expecting a correction or a tug to get up. But Mr. King just placed his hand gently on top of Toby's head, smoothing down the hair. "Why did you stop?" Mr. King asked. The question was so simple, but so strange. Toby looked confused. Because the song ended." "No," Mr. King said, shaking his head slowly. "I meant, why did you stop playing at home? Why did you stop playing the music your mother taught you?" The question hung in the air. The mall noise seemed to disappear again. Toby looked at Lucas. Lucas looked at his hands. "I thought you hated it," Toby said, his voice cracking. "You told us it was noisy. You said it disturbed your work calls. You said it made the house messy." Mr. King closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, they were shiny with tears. He looked like a man who was realizing he had made a terrible mistake and didn't know how to fix it. "I was wrong," Mr. King whispered. The admission seemed to cost him a lot of effort. "I wasn't angry at the music, boys. I was angry at the quiet. When your mother left, when she died, the house was so quiet. When you played, it reminded me of her. And it hurt too much to listen. So I told you to stop. I thought I was protecting myself, but I was just hurting you." The boys stared at him. They had never heard him talk like this. He never talked about feelings. He never talked about missing their mother. He was just the dad who worked. "I didn't know," Lucas said slowly. "We just thought we were bad at it." "You are not bad," Mr. King said firmly. He reached out and took one of Toby's hands and one of Lucas's hands in his large, rough palms. "I heard you playing just now. I came in when you started. I stood at the back and I listened. It was the most beautiful thing I have heard in a year." Sam felt her own eyes stinging with tears. She watched as the wall between the father and his sons began to crumble, right there on a piano bench. "Really?" Toby asked. "You heard us." "I heard you," Mr. King said. "And I heard her. I could hear her in the music you were making." He looked at the piano keys again. "I missed the sound. I didn't realize how much I missed it until I heard it today. I missed hearing you two be alive in that big, empty house." He squeezed their hands tight. "Can you play something for me, just for me, not for these people? Just for us?" Toby looked at Lucas. A silent communication passed between the twins, the kind of telepathy they had developed since they were babies. They nodded. "I think we remember the one Mom used to sing," Toby said. "Okay," Mr. King said. He didn't stand up. He stayed kneeling on the floor, right next to the bench, like a faithful audience member waiting for the show to begin. The boys turned back to the keys. They didn't look at the crowd anymore. They didn't look at Sam. They only had eyes for their father. Toby placed his hands on the high notes, and Lucas placed his on the low ones. They started to play. It was slow and clumsy at first. They were nervous, knowing their father was listening to every note. But as the melody started to take shape, the nervousness faded. It was the lullaby. The one their mother used to hum to them at night. They played it simply. There were no fancy rhythms, just the notes one by one. It was the most basic version of the song, but it was filled with so much love that it sounded perfect. Mr. King bowed his head. He listened to the music, and for the first time in a long time, he let the tears fall freely down his face. He didn't wipe them away. He didn't try to hide them. He just knelt there and let the sound of his sons playing wash over him, filling up the empty spaces in his heart. The mall kept bustling around them. People walked by with their frozen yogurt and their shopping bags, glancing over at the strange sight of a businessman in a suit weeping at a piano. But the family in the center of it all didn't care. The noise of the world was just background noise now. The only thing that mattered was the music, and the fact that they were finally listening to each other. The last note of the lullaby faded into the air, soft and lingering. It was a simple sound, but it seemed to silence the entire mall. The boy's fingers rested on the keys, not moving, just letting the vibration of the strings settle into the quiet moment. Mr. King was still kneeling on the hard floor. He didn't stand up right away. He kept his head bowed for a few seconds, taking a deep breath that shuddered slightly in his chest. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, but he didn't look away. He looked at Toby and Lucas with a gaze that was so full of love it made Sam's heart ache just to see it. "Thank you," Mr. King said. His voice was thick, but it was steady. "That was the best gift I have been given in a long time." Toby and Lucas didn't know what to say. They just looked at their dad, waiting for him to tell them what to do next. But for once, he didn't give an order. He simply opened his arms. Without a word, the boys slid off the piano bench. They didn't care about their fancy clothes or the people watching. They practically fell into their father's arms. Mr. King wrapped them up, holding them so tightly that they let out little surprised breaths. He buried his face in Toby's shoulder, holding his sons close. It wasn't a quick hug. It was a long, holding on for dear life kind of hug. The three of them formed a knot in the middle of the shiny, polished floor. They stayed like that for a long time. The shoppers walked around them, giving them a wide berth, respecting the bubble of grief and healing that had formed around the piano. Sam stood back a few steps, watching them. She felt a lump in her throat. She knew that this moment didn't fix everything. Their mother was still gone. The house was still big and empty. But something had shifted. The heavy door that had been locked between the father and his sons was finally open. After a while, Mr. King let go and stood up. He wiped his face with a handkerchief he pulled from his pocket, clearing his throat. He reached down and picked up his briefcase from the floor, but he held it loosely in one hand. He looked at Sam. "Sam," he said. "Yes, sir," she answered, standing up straight. "You were right to bring them here," he said. "I didn't know they needed this. I didn't know I needed this. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see." Sam felt her cheeks get warm. "I just wanted them to play, sir. They needed to make some noise." "Yes," Mr. King said. "And I think we have all been too quiet for too long." He looked down at the boys. "I think it is time to go home. But not to the office. Not to the bedrooms. We are going to sit in the living room. The big one. With the windows open." The boys' eyes went wide. "Really?" Lucas asked. "Can we open the curtains?" "Yes," Mr. King said. "We can open the curtains. And we can order pizza. The messy kind." The boys cheered. It was a real cheer, loud and uncontrolled. People walking by smiled at the sound. Mr. King turned toward the exit of the mall, but he stopped. He looked back at the piano. He reached out and touched the smooth black wood. "I hope whoever plays this next enjoys it as much as we did," he said softly. They began to walk. Sam walked a step behind them, carrying the small bag of trash from their pretzel snack. but Mr. King stopped and turned around, waiting for her. He shook his head slightly. "Walk with us, Sam," he said. "Please." So, Sam walked beside them. They didn't feel like a boss and his employee and his sons anymore. They felt like a family unit. As they walked through the long corridors of the mall, the atmosphere felt lighter. The fluorescent lights didn't seem as harsh. The noise of the crowds didn't seem as overwhelming. They passed the pretzel stand again. The man behind the counter waved at the boys. Toby and Lucas waved back, grinning, mustard still faintly visible on Lucas's chin. They passed the fountain. This time, the boys didn't just look at it, they ran over and threw a penny in, making a wish. They didn't say what the wish was, but Sam had a pretty good idea. When they reached the glass doors of the mall entrance, the sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky. It was late afternoon. The golden light was pouring through the glass panels, turning the floor into a mirror of gold. They stepped outside. The air was cooling down, but it was still warm. The city was rushing home from work, the streets filled with yellow taxis and buses. Usually, Mr. King would have his driver pull up to the curb in a long black car to whisk them away. But today, he didn't take out his phone to call the driver. "We will walk," Mr. King said. "It's only a few blocks." So, they walked. They walked along the busy sidewalk. Mr. King held Toby's hand with his right hand and Lucas's hand with his left. Sam walked on the outside, close to the street, acting as a buffer between her boys and the traffic. They talked about small things. Toby pointed out a dog that was wearing a sweater. Lucas asked why the traffic lights were red. Mr. King answered them, not with short, impatient answers, but with real explanations. He listened to their questions. He looked at them when they spoke. When they finally reached the tall glass tower where they lived, the sun was painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. They walked into the cool lobby. Arthur, the security guard, looked up from his desk. He saw them coming. He saw the way the boys were holding their father's hands. He saw the relaxed look on Sam's face. Arthur didn't say anything about the unauthorized trip. He didn't mention that they were gone for hours. He simply nodded and smiled a knowing smile. "Good evening, Mr. King," Arthur said. "Good evening, boys." "Good evening, Arthur," Mr. King said. He actually stopped at the desk. "You know, Arthur, I think I'm going to have that piano in the apartment tuned. The boys are going to play." Arthur's eyebrows went up, but he recovered quickly. "That is wonderful news, sir. Music makes a house a home." "I think you are right," Mr. King said. They walked to the elevator. This time, the ride up didn't feel like a trip back to a prison. It felt like they were going home. When the doors opened on the top floor, the apartment was quiet. It was still huge and spotless. The marble floors still shone. The furniture was still perfectly in place. But it didn't feel cold anymore. Mr. King walked to the large windows at the end of the room. He pressed a button, and the motorized blinds whirred as they slid up. The view of the city lit up at night was incredible, but for the first time, nobody was looking at the view. They were looking at each other. "Sam," Mr. King said, turning to her. "Please, don't worry about the laundry or the kitchen tonight. Order the pizza. Get extra cheese. Sit with us." Sam smiled. "I can do that, sir." "And Sam," he added. "Yes. Tomorrow, if the weather is nice, take them to the park. The real one." Not the fenced one. The one with the dirt and the swings. I will, Sam promised. The pizza arrived, and they ate it in the living room, sitting on the expensive rug instead of the table. They got sauce on the rug. They dropped napkins on the floor. Mr. King didn't scold them. He just ate his pizza and laughed when Lucas told a joke that didn't make any sense. Later that night, after the boys were bathed and tucked into bed, Mr. King walked Sam to the door. He stopped her before she left. "I don't know how to thank you," he said. "I almost lost them to the silence. You brought them back." "You didn't lose them, sir," Sam said gently. "You just got a little lost yourself. But you found your way back." Mr. King nodded. "I hope so." Sam walked out into the night air. She took the subway home, just like she always did. Her feet were tired, and her back hurt a little. But as she sat on the train, watching the lights of the city flash by in the dark window, she smiled. She knew that tomorrow, the penthouse would still be big. The boys would still be rich. But she also knew that the silence was gone. And in its place, there was music. That was a story worth telling.